Welcome to the imagery module, an entire module dedicated to imagery, photos, icons, illustrations, all that good stuff. Now, we've all heard the phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words. But why is that? Why would someone say a picture is worth 1,000 words? Well, it's kind of self-explanatory, but we can actually digest more information with a quick glance of a photo or a visual representation of whatever that thing is that we're trying to let our people know, to let our users know, customers know. Most people, you'll often hear people say, oh, I'm a really visual person. Well, the fact is, a lot of us are visual people, and that's why we respond to visual, because for the most part, we all have eyes and we see things and we recognize things the same way that it feels like you and I are looking at each other right now, and that creates at least some sort of emotion. And so images do the same thing. Pictures are quicker to see, to digest the information. You know, think about Medium versus Instagram. Instagram is way more popular than Medium because it's nothing but a bunch of images to scroll through. So I'm getting a little carried away on the whole images thing, but it's important to know that images are very powerful. And imagery will always have a huge impact on the overall aesthetics and the mood and the look and feel of the way your projects present themselves. So typography, color, layout, all of those things are going to be really important. But just as important, if you're injecting imagery into your projects, they need to go along with the overall direction. And if you're using photos, they have to be phenomenal photos. If you're using icons, they have to be really nice, clean, cohesive, organized, balanced icons. If you're using illustrations, they need to match the style. So no matter what kind of images that you're using in your projects, they need to have that same balance of aesthetics and cleanliness that your overall framework for your interface does. All right, let's take a quick look at all of the different types of imagery that you might find in your interfaces. First of all, we've got static photos. Think about Unsplash or stock photography of any kind, or big background images, or just photos that aren't going to change. Photos that you pick, you curate, and you have complete control over. Whether you're doing a photo shoot with a professional photographer or you're handed imagery from someone else, these are going to be static, mostly static images that are not going to be changed on a regular basis. And even if they are going to be changed, they might be rotated between several different versions. But static photos, for the most part, you have control over. So you need to make sure they are great imagery, great photos. And one caveat to stock photography, and sometimes this applies to really good sites like Unsplash, if it's just a picture of someone eating a salad and being really happy, it's not going to have the same emotional quality as a candid photo of someone eating a meal in a moody environment, or a businessman jumping in the air with a blue sky with a briefcase. It just feels fake and it will trigger bad emotions. So you should just avoid stock photography like that, really at all costs. If you have to use stock photography, you're gonna have to just search for images that really feel authentic and real based on the type of project that you're working on. Next up, we've got dynamic images. Think of Instagram. You've got all of these different avatars. You've got everybody's individual posts. You can't really predict what images are going to show up. It's all user-generated content. In fact, this is not even an image. It's really, I mean, it is an image, but it's a screenshot of a tweet. But again, it's all user-generated. And Instagram is a great example of this. You never know whether it's going to be a video or a photo, and you have some control over what you allow on your project, but when you're working with dynamic images, you don't know if it's going to be a screenshot or what. It could be the worst photo that you've ever seen. You can't predict what images are going to get shown. So this opens up a whole new can of worms when it comes to designing around that. Next up, we have glyphs, which really comes from the typography world. This is the font that I'm using for Shift Nudge. And if you look at the full alphabet and all of the characters, really all of these inside of these squares are glyphs. even the letters, they're technically considered glyphs. Something like the @ symbol or the question mark or the ampersand, all of these are actual glyphs. And glyphs are kind of like a very, very direct representation of something, where the @ symbol is specifically representing at, and it's virtually ubiquitous around any English speaking language. That's just going to be a solid glyph that will never be different. It might have a different style, but it's just a strong representation of what it is. Whereas some people will often call icons glyphs, especially when you have these simple one color icons. These are often referred to as glyphs. You have, for example, activity. You've got the @ sign here, which definitely is a glyph. You've got Bluetooth, which is kind of a glyph at this point because there's no other really symbol that represents Bluetooth more than that. Whereas an icon of a battery, this is definitely more of an icon because it's not the globally accepted version of a battery. Sometimes it's vertical, sometimes it might be a watch battery, sometimes it might be a car battery. It's a little bit different. So an icon is more of a visual representation of a real life object versus a glyph is a little bit more concrete in its meaning. Here's a bunch of icons that I designed for the ExxonMobil design system. Some of them might be considered more of a glyph, but most of them overall are going to be more of an icon category. And it's really more about semantics. It doesn't matter if you're calling it icons or glyphs, not really that big of a deal. It's still some little symbol that's designed to represent something else. But where a lot of people call these flat, solid color icons glyphs, it's because you have also icons that look like this that are almost illustrations, but they might just have a little bit more character to them. Maybe they're 2, 3 colors. This is the Streamline icon emoji set. So it's still an icon, but it's got a little bit more playfulness to it. It's got a little bit, maybe there's a little shadow, a few extra features. It's kind of like that, pushing the icon to the extreme. Think of also like app icons on your home screen of your mobile phone. Some of them might be flat and they might be more glyph-like, but icon is more of an overarching term that represents really any of these styles, whether it's flat or 2-color or there's a little bit of a gradient. It's going to be safe to call all of these icons. So when does an icon become an illustration? Well, there's a little bit of gray area, but for the most part, illustrations are going to be much larger. There's going to be a bit of an environment. This is the humans.com library from Pablo Stanley. And technically you could simplify these down into icons if they're really small and you simplified them a lot. But when they're a lot more organic and they don't necessarily fit into a small little tiny box, they're definitely going to be more of an illustration, although they are going to fit into their own rectangular box somewhere as you use them. But illustrations, in general, are just going to create more of a scene, create more of a mood and a feeling. And it doesn't have to be this particular style. There's lots and lots of styles of illustration. I just bring this up as an example because these are actually open source and you can download them all and use them, mix and match, all of that good stuff. Next of all, we've got 3-dimensional design, 3D modeling. And one of the best I've ever seen is Mike from Creative Mints. He just creates these really elaborate 3D models. A lot of times he uses Cinema 4D for these. And just all of his 3D work is really impeccable. The style that he produces with his 3D models is just phenomenal. And this really kind of takes the illustration style to the next level. A lot of his stuff, even this right here, you could technically recreate this probably in something like Illustrator or Figma, but it just has like such a cool dimensional look that the 3D model just really adds a lot of interest, visual interest to a design. These are just really nice images. And I've been following Mike for a long time, and I know he puts a ton of time into modeling these things and kind of incorporating it into his layouts. And so it's not just this quick, like, oh yeah, let me just whip up a 3D model. This is it's a very niche expertise, and he just happens to be great at layout and 3D modeling. So you're not always going to have these available at your fingertips, but when you're working with someone or you have assets or the ability to create phenomenal imagery with 3D models, it can really take your work to the next level. And another type of image that a lot of people aren't really using these days is collage. I think that there's a lot of different ways that you could combine elements to create pretty interesting types of things for websites, whether it's drawing on a photo or putting photos together. Just different types of collages are almost an easy way to kind of piece together an interesting type of visual concept. And it could be something that might spice up an Unsplash photo. Maybe you draw something on your iPad or overlay it. It could just be another interesting way to create images for your project. For the most part, in this imagery module, we're really going to focus on photos, both dynamic and static, and look at a lot of different ways to use those. We're also going to take a pretty hefty look at icons, both using an existing icon set, expanding on that icon set, or creating your own icon set from scratch. There's a lot of best practices that we can dig into in all of the icon category. And also I want to show a couple of examples for ways that you can create your own simple illustrations just by drawing shapes in your design tool, adding gradients, adding a little bit of lighting effects. So we'll cover a lot of that. So no homework in this particular video lesson. So just wanted to prepare you for what's to come. So I look forward to diving into the imagery module with you.